Have you ever sat in the quiet of your own home, maybe at the kitchen table, maybe looking out the window, and wondered, when did everything shift between me and my children? One moment, you're their world, their everything, the one they run to with scraped knees, broken hearts, and big dreams. The next, you feel like background noise, like the TV on low that no one really listens to. You sacrificed so much, gave your body, your time, your energy. You stayed up through fevers and heartbreaks, celebrated their victories louder than your own, and held back tears just to keep them smiling. You worked holidays, skipped vacations, and let your dreams take a back seat so theirs could ride up front. You didn't complain, you loved them. That love, unshakable, unconditional, was never in question. But now when you speak, they cut you off. When you offer advice, they roll their eyes or say, "I know." When you need help, they suddenly get very busy, very fast. And maybe the hardest part, harder than the silence, harder than the dismissal, is the feeling that somehow, somewhere along the line, you became invisible. If you've felt this, if your chest has ever tightened after a phone call that ended too quickly, or a visit where your words didn't seem to matter, please hear me now. You are not alone. Many parents reach a crossroads in life, a quiet, aching moment when they realize the roles have shifted. You used to be the compass, the anchor, the voice that calmed their storms. And now, you're treated like you don't know the way, like your presence is optional, like your voice is a suggestion, not something to be respected. And that pain, it's not small, it cuts deep, deeper than most wounds, because it's not just about being ignored, it's about being forgotten by the very people you helped build from the ground up. It's tempting, I know, to want to scream, "Don't you remember everything I've done for you?" It's natural to feel angry or wounded, or to wonder, what did I do wrong? But here's a truth I want you to sit with. Demanding respect rarely earns it. Shouting to be heard often gets you more silence, not less. But, and this is where things begin to shift, what does work is quieter, it's steadier, and it's far more powerful than any argument or guilt trip. It begins not with your children changing their ways, but with you reclaiming your space, with small but mighty steps that restore the dignity, presence, and respect you deserve, not just as a parent, but as a human being with your own story. So today we're going to talk about that shift. We're going to explore the quiet power that comes not from controlling others, but from honoring yourself. Because you don't have to chase their approval to feel worthy. You don't have to be everything to them to matter. You just have to begin showing up differently. And that begins with the very first, often overlooked step. Letting go of the need to please. Let's start here, where so many quiet heartbreaks begin. Have you ever said yes when everything inside you whispered no? Not because you wanted to, but because you didn't want to disappoint them? Maybe you watched their faces for the smallest sign of irritation, then adjusted your tone, your plans, your needs, just to keep the peace. You told yourself, it's easier this way, it's not a big deal. But over time, those little sacrifices start stacking up, like pebbles in your pocket. One by one, they don't feel heavy, but carry them long enough, and suddenly, you can't move like you used to. You can't breathe like you used to. You rearrange your day, again, to babysit, even though your body was aching. You let them speak to you in a tone that made your stomach twist, just so you wouldn't seem difficult. You nodded along when they made decisions about your life as if you weren't even there. You told yourself it was love, that keeping the family close was worth it. But here's a truth few people say out loud. The more you chase approval, the faster respect slips away. Not because your children are ungrateful or unkind, but because human nature doesn't admire what always yields. We value strength, even quiet strength, more than self-erasure. I remember a woman named Margaret, fierce heart, gentle voice. She raised 3 children on her own, through storms, sickness, and sacrifices no one saw. But as they grew, she started stepping aside more and more. She let them choose everything, what she ate, how she spent her money, even where she lived. "I just want to keep the peace," she said. "I don't want to cause trouble." But the more she disappeared into convenience, the more they stopped looking for her altogether. She thought she was being kind. What they saw was someone they didn't have to take seriously anymore. You see, respect doesn't grow from self-sacrifice alone. It grows from self-respect. And here's where it starts. Boundaries, not walls. Just the quiet, powerful decision to stop bending yourself into something unrecognizable for someone else's comfort. You don't have to become cold. You don't have to raise your voice. But you are allowed, fully allowed, to take up space. To speak when something doesn't feel right. To say, I love you, but not like this. Because every time you silence your own voice just to keep theirs happy, you're teaching them something. You're teaching them that your time, your energy, your truth, they're all optional, and they're not. Let that sink in. You matter. It's not too late to shift this. You can start small. Next time they ask something unreasonable, pause. Ask yourself, what do I really want here? And if your heart says no, say no, with grace, not guilt. You don't need their permission to protect your peace. And here's what's beautiful. When you begin to show up with quiet strength, they notice. It may take time. It may feel uncomfortable at first, but slowly, steadily, they'll begin to meet you where you stand. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped stepping aside. Let this be the first step back toward yourself. Not with blame, not with bitterness, but with the kind of dignity that says, I've done enough shrinking. It's time to stand tall. Let's talk about something we've all felt, the sting of being talked down to. You say something meaningful, something from the heart, and they brush it off. Maybe they scoff, maybe they interrupt. Maybe they say, you just don't get it, Mom, or times have changed, Dad. And in that moment, everything inside you wants to rise up. You want to push back, to say, how dare you speak to me like that? To remind them of everything you've done, every sacrifice you made. You want them to see you again. But here's the paradox, raising your voice doesn't raise your value. In fact, when we argue to reclaim respect, we often lose more of it. Because shouting tells them their words still control your peace. What if I told you there's a better way, a quieter way, a stronger way? Stop arguing, start leading. There's a kind of strength that doesn't make noise. It doesn't stomp. It doesn't slam doors. It simply is. Like the ocean on a still morning, powerful, steady, impossible to ignore. Let me tell you about Frank. He was a retired teacher. Brilliant mind, gentle soul. For decades, students listened when he spoke. But at home, with his adult children, it was different. They cut him off, laughed at his ideas, treated him like someone out of touch. At first, he argued. He tried to prove he still mattered. Conversations became battles. Dinners ended in silence. He thought that fighting back meant standing up for himself. But then something shifted. Frank stopped arguing, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. He still shared his thoughts, but calmly. He no longer tried to win. He just offered what he had and stepped back. He spoke with calm, measured presence. And most importantly, he stopped seeking their validation. And something incredible happened. They started listening, not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't have to. He carried himself like someone who knew who he was. And that confidence made them pause. It made them pay attention. You see, people stop listening when they feel pushed, but they lean in when they feel safe. And the safest presence in the room is often the one who doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. When you respond with calm certainty, it changes the energy in the room. It says, I know my worth. I don't need to convince you. I just need to be me. So the next time someone speaks to you in a way that hurts, pause. Don't match their tone. Don't mirror their frustration. Instead, breathe. Speak slowly, speak clearly, and speak once. Let your tone carry your dignity. Let your silence, when necessary, speak volumes. You are not here to beg for respect. You're here to model it. Remember, children don't learn how to treat their parents by being yelled at. They learn by watching how their parents treat themselves. So carry yourself with quiet strength. Set the emotional temperature in the room. Let your peace be unshakable, not because you're pretending everything's fine, but because you've chosen not to be pulled into every storm. You don't have to fight to be heard, just live in a way that's worth listening to. There's a quiet heartbreak that many parents carry, a kind that doesn't come with shouting matches or slamming doors. It comes with waiting, waiting by the phone that doesn't ring, waiting for a thank you that never comes, waiting to feel needed again. And in that waiting, your heart starts to whisper a dangerous question. Am I still important to them? Of course you love your children. That kind of love doesn't vanish. But here's a gentle truth that's hard to swallow. Depending on them to feel whole will only leave you feeling hollow. It's not about pulling away in bitterness. It's about standing tall in your emotional independence. Because the more your happiness depends on how often they visit, how kindly they speak, or how much attention they give you, the more power you give away. Let me tell you about Helen. She's the kind of woman who lights up a room. Kind eyes, soft laugh, always remembering birthdays and favorite meals. She poured herself into motherhood, and when her kids moved away, she felt adrift. She called daily, left voicemails, sent little gifts, just because. She always said, "I miss you so much." And at first her kids answered, but over time, the calls grew shorter, the replies slower, until one day she realized she'd become background noise in their busy lives. It broke her heart. But instead of retreating in sadness or chasing harder, she did something brave. She turned the energy inward. She joined a local dance class, took walks with neighbors, picked up watercolor again, started laughing at old movies and sitting in the sun just for the joy of it. She stopped waiting for her children to make her feel fulfilled and started fulfilling herself. And something strange happened. Her phone started ringing again, but this time they weren't calling out of guilt. They were curious. They wanted to hear about her life, her stories, her spark. She wasn't just a source of support. They saw her as a person again. Because when you stop chasing connection and start living fully, you become magnetic. Emotional detachment doesn't mean shutting your heart. It means not tying your joy to someone else's attention. It means giving your love freely, but not at the expense of your peace. You are allowed to feel the ache when they don't call. You're human. But let that ache be a nudge, not to chase, but to rediscover yourself. What lights you up? What did you once love that got buried beneath errands and responsibilities? This is your time, not just to wait, not just to give, but to grow. So the next time you feel that pull to overextend, to prove your worth, pause and ask, what do I need from me right now? Because here's the truth. The less you rely on them to feel seen, the more they begin to see you. Not as someone clinging to the past, but as someone standing beautifully in the present, with stories still unfolding, with laughter still echoing, with a life still rich with meaning. Detach, not to punish them, but to reclaim you. Because when your joy rises from within, your presence becomes a gift, not a plea. Let's talk about something many of us were never taught growing up. Boundaries. Not the kind that push people away. Not coldness, not silence, not punishment. I'm talking about the kind of boundary that says, this is how I deserve to be treated, and I'm no longer afraid to say so. Because here's the truth. Love without boundaries turns into exhaustion. And silence? Over time, it becomes permission. If you've ever left a conversation feeling small, if your children interrupt, dismiss, or talk over you like your voice doesn't carry weight, that's not just rudeness. That's a sign that somewhere along the line, your boundaries faded into the background. And maybe you let it happen, not out of weakness, but out of love. Out of a desire to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to be easy to get along with. But peace that comes at the cost of your dignity is not peace. It's quiet suffering. Let me tell you about Robert. He wasn't the kind of man who liked confrontation. A retired businessman respected by colleagues, trusted by his community. But at home, something was different. His grown children interrupted him mid-sentence, rolled their eyes, talked to him as if he was just someone in the room. Not someone who had raised them with grit and grace. He let it go for a while, told himself, they're just tired, it's not worth a fight. But each time he said nothing, the line got pushed a little further, until one evening, over dinner, his son snapped at him for how he told a simple story. Robert didn't yell, he didn't scold, he waited. And when the room had settled, he looked up and said, calmly but clearly, "You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I expect to be spoken to with respect. If that's not possible, I'll step away from conversations like this." And that changed everything. He didn't threaten. He didn't guilt trip. He set a standard. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks. You decide who enters, how long they stay, and what behavior is welcome. You can still love deeply. You can still show up for your family. But love that asks you to disappear is not love. It's imbalance. When you begin to set clear, loving boundaries, something powerful happens. People, yes, even your children, begin to adjust. They may resist at first. They may test the limits. But over time, they learn. Your presence is valuable. Your voice matters. Your time is not guaranteed, it is offered. Start with small, clear steps. If they speak sharply, say, "Please speak to me kindly. I won't stay in a conversation that turns hurtful." If they make plans without asking you, try, "I appreciate being included in decisions that affect me. I need to be part of those conversations." You don't need to justify. You just need to be consistent. Think of your boundaries as a lighthouse, not a fence. You're not shutting people out. You're showing them where the rocks are, where the safe passage lies, and if they care to reach you, they'll steer respectfully. Boundaries don't weaken relationships. They refine them. They separate what's real from what's convenient, and most of all, they protect your sense of self. Because here's what you need to remember. You are not here to be stepped over. You are not a fixture in their lives. You are a force, a foundation. And when you draw those lines with calm, unwavering strength, you invite a deeper kind of love, the kind built not on expectation, but on respect. There's a kind of giving that comes naturally to parents. It's not taught, it's lived. You give your time, your energy, your resources. You give without being asked, without expecting anything in return. But somewhere along the line, giving becomes the trap. Not because generosity is wrong, but because when it's constant, unrecognized, and taken for granted, it stops being a gift and starts becoming your quiet undoing. Have you ever found yourself helping before they even asked? Lending money, rearranging your day, stepping in to solve problems, all while telling yourself, that's just what a good parent does? And yet, when you need something, a ride to the doctor, a check-in call, a moment of support, it's met with silence, or worse, excuses. You tell yourself they're busy, that it's no big deal. But inside, it hurts. It's not about needing praise or rewards. It's about being seen. Let me introduce you to George. George was the yes man in his family. A proud father of 3, always the first to offer help. If one of his kids needed money, he wired it. If they needed a babysitter, he canceled appointments. If a pipe burst, he showed up with tools and a flashlight before they even asked. But then George needed them. He had a minor surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that he couldn't manage alone for a few days. Not one of his children stayed. They had meetings, commitments, other plans. They loved him, they said. But their absence told another story, and something in George broke. But instead of turning bitter, he got clear. He didn't stop loving his children, but he stopped saying yes by default. The next time someone asked him for help, he paused and said, "I'd like to help, but I already have plans. Can we figure something else out? Or, I can assist, but I need you to take care of these other things first." At first, they were surprised, even frustrated. But over time, something shifted. They began to say thank you more often. They asked instead of assumed. They checked in, not just when they needed something, but to see how he was doing. Because now his help had weight again. It was no longer background noise. It was intentional. Offered, not owed. This is what many people forget. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional availability. When you give endlessly without pause, you teach people that your time, your energy, your kindness, they're unlimited, automatic, disposable. But when you start giving with intention, with boundaries, your love becomes visible again. It's not about withholding, it's about creating space where appreciation can live. So ask yourself gently, where have you said yes when your soul whispered no? When have you offered help and walked away feeling depleted, unnoticed, unimportant? Let that be your signal, not to stop giving, but to give differently. You can still be generous, still be loving, still be present. But now let your giving come from a place of strength, not habit, from choice, not obligation. Because when your presence is no longer assumed, it becomes valued. When your yes is deliberate, your no gains meaning. And when you show up for yourself with the same compassion you've shown others for decades, something profound happens. You stop being the helper in the background and start being the person everyone wants to honor. There comes a moment in every parent's life when the house grows quieter, the calendar emptier, and the roles you've held for decades begin to fade. You're still their mom, still their dad. But the daily needs, the lunches, the rides, the heart-to-hearts before bed, are no longer part of your rhythm. And it's easy in that silence to wonder, if I'm not taking care of them, then who am I now? For so long, your identity has been wrapped in theirs. You've been the fixer, the cheerleader, the planner, the provider. You've shaped your days around their needs, built your life around their lives. And maybe you even told yourself, I'll focus on me once they're settled. But now they're grown, and here you are, with time, space, and a question, what fills me up now? This is not the end of your story. In fact, it's one of the most sacred chapters. Because here's the truth so many forget. You are not just a parent. You are a person with dreams, talents, curiosities, and desires that didn't disappear when the diapers were done and the carpooling ended. And reclaiming that person isn't selfish. It's essential. Let me tell you about Evelyn. For over 30 years, she poured herself into raising her children. She packed lunches with handwritten notes, sat through countless recitals and late-night talks. Her joy was their joy. But when the last child moved out, she found herself staring at the kitchen table, wondering what came next. She waited for phone calls, filled her days with errands, and told herself that was enough. Until one morning she caught her reflection in the window and whispered, "I miss me." So she made a change. She signed up for a writing class at the library, started gardening again, took solo trips to nearby towns. She reconnected with friends, not as someone's mother, but as herself. She tried new recipes, she laughed louder, and slowly she began to feel alive again. And do you know what happened? Her children started calling more, not because she was waiting for them, but because she had stories to tell. Her joy became magnetic, her life vibrant. She wasn't just their mom anymore. She was Evelyn, a woman with momentum, purpose, and light in her eyes. You see, when you begin to live for you, it doesn't pull you away from your children. It draws them closer. Not out of duty, but out of admiration. So let me ask you gently, what have you set aside that once made you feel alive? What hobby, passion, or interest has been waiting patiently for your return? This season of life, right here, right now, is yours to shape. You don't need permission to explore again, to learn again, to dream again. Take the trip, pick up the paintbrush, learn the instrument, volunteer, dance, read, rest, laugh. Because you are not just the story behind your children's success, you are a story still being written. And the more you reclaim your identity outside of parenting, the more your children begin to see you, not just as someone who raised them, but as someone they admire. You've spent so much of your life pouring into others. Now, it's time to pour some of that love back into yourself. By now, you've walked with me through the quiet aches and hard truths of what it means to be a parent whose children have drifted, dismissed, or forgotten how to honor you. You've faced the moments when you felt invisible, when your voice felt too soft to matter, when you gave and the only thing that seemed to echo back was silence. But here's the truth that's been waiting for you all along. You never needed to shout to be heard. You only needed to remember who you are. Respect isn't something we demand from others. It's something we embody within ourselves. And the moment you begin to live from that place of self-worth, everything around you starts to shift. Maybe your children don't notice right away. Maybe they resist the changes in you at first, because they're used to the version of you who always said yes, who stayed quiet, who waited? But that discomfort isn't failure, it's growth. And growth takes courage. When you begin setting healthy boundaries, when you speak with calm certainty instead of anxious fear, when you stop chasing approval and start living with quiet power, you're not pushing your children away. You're inviting them to meet the real you. Not the version who bends to keep the peace, not the version who overgives out of fear, but the version who stands tall with grace, who says no with love, who says yes with purpose, who fills her days or his days with meaning, laughter, and dignity. Because here's something powerful to hold on to. You are worthy, not because of what you give, not because of how much you've done, but simply because you are you. The world needs that version of you. Your family needs it too, even if they don't realize it yet. So if your children speak more gently now, if they call more often, listen longer, or ask for your thoughts with new interest, that's not a coincidence. That's the effect of your quiet transformation. That's what happens when you stop shrinking and start standing in your truth. And even if they don't respond right away, even if they never do, please know this: you have already won. Because the respect you seek doesn't begin with them. It begins with how you see yourself. So ask yourself now, where am I still giving my power away? Is it in the way I say yes when I want to say no? Is it in the silence I keep when my voice wants to be heard? Is it in the waiting for attention, for recognition, for permission to feel whole? Start there. Make one small shift today. Say, I have plans, even if your only plan is rest. Say, that tone doesn't work for me, with calm strength. Say, I matter, not just in words, but in action. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to change everything overnight. You only have to begin. And if this message has found you in a moment of sadness, if you've been sitting with the ache of being overlooked or undervalued, please let this be your reminder. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. And you are never too old to reclaim your voice. Leave a comment if this spoke to your heart. Your story, your truth, could be the light someone else needs right now. And if this message helped you, share it with a friend. Let's remind each other that healing doesn't happen alone. It happens when we rise together. Until next time, walk gently, stand tall, and live with the kind of dignity that needs no permission to shine.